Hi, I'm Christina Morgan. Welcome back to Chapter 5 of the West and Narrative History. This is the Hellenistic era and the rise of Rome. And today we're going to talk about the Hellenistic environment and the Hellenistic civilization. Last time we talked a little bit about the rise of the Hellenistic era with Alexander the Great and the fall of Sparta, or the lack of Sparta securing an empire. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Hellenistic environment and what that looked like. So after Alexander the Great died, his closest generals mark out territory of the great empire for themselves, and then they start fighting over it as to who's going to be sort of the big man in charge. And that takes up the Eastern Mediterranean for about 300 years. But despite that, the fighting that's going on, there's a new cosmopolitan culture that comes out of all this mixing of peoples that's been going on, fusing Greek and barbarian into a new society. And remember, barbarian is what the Greeks called the non-Greek people, because they said they sounded like bar, like they didn't understand their language. Hellenic culture, or Greek culture, was now spread widely, and centralized political authority provided a higher level of comfort and security. So Hellenic or Greek culture had spread, and now that's fusing with these local cultures to make something new that we call Hellenistic culture. Uh, Gold was returned into circulation, so we're getting a little more prosperity. Power of popular assemblies and elected officials declined. This is becoming less popular, just part of functionality and just the way government is done. They didn't find any use for amateur military service or advice. Armies were professional, and they really, whereas before they'd been made up of citizen soldiers, now we have professional armies. And labor wasn't as important because slaves did most of the work. So we find a lot of shifting in culture. It affirmed the worth of the individual, but you were reduced to a clog in the machinery of the empire. If you think back to the Greek polis, every person's individual achievement meant something. Every person's contribution counted, could be seen, and your absence was felt in the polis. Now you're just a cog in a machine. You pull one out, you put another one in, it's the same difference. So it's a big shift in thinking and culture. Theater stayed clear of politics. This is a huge shift. Before, theater was how people got their information about politics. It's how they learned how to make their decisions on political matters of the day, was to go to the theater and watch the plays. Now theater is taking away from all political matters. So this is a completely different purpose for theater. There was a new genre of writing called the novel. Not new to us, of course, but new to them. Fantasies and romances were the most popular novels that were coming out at the time. And in general, people appeal to the emotion rather than to the intellect in the literary and visual arts. It might have been erotic, it might be cute, it might be haggard, but something that appealed to your emotions. So it was a new kind of appeal. The Greeks had kind of this ideal form. It wasn't so much about being perfect anymore. It was about something that would draw on your emotions. People and artists lacked the previous political freedom that gave Hellenic peoples a goal. Instead, these arts are now serving as a distraction from the boredom of Hellenistic life. There is a philosophical turn towards what they call the philosophies of life and personal fulfillment in a new political environment. So, the three main things we see here are Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Cynicism. Stoics had this belief in the acceptance of the inevitable, and so they were emotionally detached to preserve inner peace. So basically, they were sort of the ones that showed no emotion because we just need to accept what's going to happen. We can't stop it, so there's no use in getting emotional about it. That's sort of the Stoic philosophy. Epicureanism says nothing is permanent, everything fades. Life's only meaning is in the pursuit of pleasure. It's sort of the YOLO philosophy. You only live once. Cynicism spurn social conventions and standards of decency. They minimize their needs, wants, and obligations. So cynics basically said, you people are crazy. You want too much. You do too much. We just need the bare minimum of life. And we don't need to do that much for other people. We don't need to want that much from other people. We just kind of need to live and do the bare minimum. And the rest of you are just overdoers, overtakers, and they also would be the ones who would, when we call people cynics, we say that it's someone who would look at something and see kind of the worst in it, or the worst outcome possible as what could happen. There was a giant library and museum at Alexandria that was created, and this systematized learning. There were a lot of authors, scholars, scientists, engineers that studied in Alexandria, and so there was a great amount of learning that happened during this time. They pioneered new literary genres. Pastoral poetry was the most popular, and scientific and engineering advances in this period. There were so many. Euclid invented geometry, so you can thank him for that. Or if you're really ambitious, thank Archimedes for calculus. Aristophanes dealt with Earth's circumference. You can see we have others: Hipparchus, Aristarchus, Ptolemy, Herophilus, and Erasistratus. But you can see even back in those days, they were already dealing with heliocentrism, or the sun as the center of the universe, or the solar system. So they're already dealing with the nervous system and veins and arteries, scientific achievements that were far, far ahead of of their time. This is the Hellenistic sculptor. They wanted to convey drama and emotion rather than simply an ideal form. So that's the Hellenistic society and civilization. Up next, we're going to talk about the origins of Rome. So I hope I'll see you in part 3.